Hello everyone, we are live yet again, and of course I'm about to sneeze right at the top of the hour, so apologies if it happens. This is going to be one of my author's chats of the week, so I'm going to kind of keep my eye out for my guest host and see when he is ready to log in. But yeah, it's been kind of a nice wrap-up of the month for me, because I finished the draft of Volume 13, the first draft of Volume 13 for my Guardian Speaker series, which is my Dark Viking Fantasy, right at the end of last week. So that was good, because that was my goal. That means I'm on track for once, which is fantastic. And I've been spending the last couple days going back through it, doing one solid read-through, just to make sure all the chapters flow together, make sure I didn't forget anything that I intended to weave in at a later point of the volume. And so it looked good to go, and now I put it to essentially bookish bed until I'm ready to gear it up for ARC readers next year. Thank you. Thank you. And yeah, well, that also means that tomorrow I'm going to start the 14th novella. And depending on how they break, but the last one went really quickly and covered a lot of ground, even though, again, they're short reads, so there are only so many chapters in them. But because of that, I kept aiming for 16 novellas, and I may just end up with 15 this time. So who knows? We'll see. But yeah, so what's behind me is some of the examples of a few of the books that I've written and published, and yeah, so those are some of my examples. It's a nice little backboard, and I love it because it's inverted, so it makes me doing these lives or anything like this real easy, and I don't have to remember to do the inverse filter or whatnot, and it just works out. Yeah, like I said, I keep glancing. There we go, because I am going to have a co-host today, another author, but in just a moment maybe he'll do the same, because that's why I love doing these authors chats. It allows us to have two different points of view. Hello.
Hello, let me get I'm new to this whole live thing.
It's okay. It
There
always,
we go.
you're not the first one. Probably one out of three of people who I talk to, it's their first live. But I actually have some
Yeah,
questions chiming in about writing that we'll get to in just a moment. But how are you?
great.
It's so very nice to see you and meet you in kind of a face-to-face method.
Well, I'm doing really well, and thank you for asking. And I hope I've been had a little frog in my throat all day, so hopefully it will
It's okay.
behave.
It's
But
okay.
I did bring
Hopefully no
some
one's
tea.
judging that. That is good.
Yes,
But yeah, so what I'll do
yeah.
real quickly is, I usually keep these fairly casual, and I love the fact that I have some questions chime in right at the beginning. But for you, because it's the first time you're being one of my co-hosts, I'll let you introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about what you write, and then we'll go from there.
Okay, great. My name is Matthew Arnold Stern. And I started writing in high school. This was way back in the 70s, so that should give you an idea about how ancient I am. And I've been a published author since 2005. I've been writing, actually, before that, I'm a technical writer. In my day job, I've been in the computer industry for 40 years. And I've published four novels. The two most recent ones are with Black Rose Writing. My novel Amiga came out in 2019, and it's inspired by my experiences in the computer industry in the 1980s. My more recent novel with Black Rose is The Remainders. Came out a couple of years ago, and it's about a homeless son and its troubled father, and how they have to reconnect through Southern California. And I've also written a book based on my public speaking experiences, which is Mastering Table Topics, which is a book on how to give impromptu speeches. And if you're interested in any of those books, the links in my bio will take you to more information.
Fantastic. No, it's always kind of fun because I'm an epic fantasy author, so I write definitely in a very whimsical style in many ways, but it's always nice to talk to other authors who have different genres and subgenres that they focus on, because there's so many readers out there, and just because you may not like maybe fantasy. They may like something along the lines of one of the topics that you write. But yeah, so before, I don't want to like hold these questions for too long, but one of the questions that popped up right before you logged in said, um, so I guess what do we do? I'm trying to understand the question. I'm assuming is how did we get our first novels published? How long did it take us to write first novel in the sense of how do we get into the writing process? So do you want to answer that one first?
Certainly, the first novel I wrote was uh, online, and I started it in 2001. And it took me about 2 years to write the initial draft of it. And then I did some submitting and shopping around, and then an opportunity came up for to self-publish it, and I self-published it through Lulu, which is an excellent website. So those of you who are looking at self-publishing, what's great about Lulu is that you can publish it as paperback, hard copy, and your choice or your variety of ebook formats. I know that some people don't want to be limited to just Amazon, but you could
True.
also publish on Apple Books and Google Books and Barnes and Noble through their Nook platform. So I self-published my first two novels and Mastering Table Topics. But I really wanted to take a shot at getting accepted by a publisher.
Hmm.
So the two novels that I wrote for Black Rose, Amiga, and the remainders, I actually wrote them in 2016 when I was going through a really difficult time with a lot of drama going on in my family, and actually finished drafts of both books that year. And it took me an additional, uh, so it was about, I think, a total of 3 years from when I wrote Amiga to publication. And then the remainders took a few more years because I was focused on uh, Amiga and promoting that. So yeah, it does take some time, and of course, getting the first draft is always it takes the shortest amount of time. It's the editing and polishing and
That's
getting
true.
beta readers and knowing at what point is it ready for submission or publication. So that
Hmm.
probably takes the longest time.
Yeah, and it's also I think the first time around since you're learning and you're just trying to figure out the new platforms. I mean, there's so many learning curves from where you find your editor or trying to figure out do you do beta readers, how many, etc. And that just takes a lot of time to establish. But I do believe, at least from my experience, it gets quicker. Now I can't say it's quick, but it does get
Yeah.
quicker throughout because it took me and I've said this many times on these lives where for my first one, which is the one in the blue, it took me about 10 years from the idea to publication. For those, I was in college, so there was a hiatus, so I will admit that. But it just took a long time trying to figure out the editing process and again, finding an editor and what to do. I queried because I wasn't sure. I don't think I queried well because I was, again, the first time. And it does not surprise me that, I didn't get picked up at that first go round, but went through the self publishing side of things for it. And since then, everything has gone quicker and quicker each time. And I know right now, since I have two series I'm publishing simultaneously, I have a method of the mornings are my writing time. So I'm writing in the mornings. In the afternoons, I'm either editing a different book, going through formatting, marketing. And so because I have the staggered layer ability, it looks like I'm publishing a lot, but it's because I have them all staggered at different stages. So I'm moving things along. It's just, it's an illusion that it goes quickly.
Yeah. And you made a really good point about how long it takes to start to come up with an idea to when you actually start writing it down. the work in progress that I'm working on now, which is Christina's portrait, it is a story I've been trying to write since high school. This was about
Oh,
47 years ago. And I would say it took me 44 years to figure out how to write it because I tried various things. It covers a very difficult subject in our growing up. And so it took me about 44 years to figure that out, how to do it, and then about 3 years to do the actual writing.
hmm. And yeah, I mean, and again, I think that's a cool thing talking about different writers because everybody comes up with stories at different paces too, and someone may come up with like a new story idea every day,
Yeah.
and it is interesting how long it takes for then those writers and authors to finally go back and work on it and then make it into a reality because I'm one of those authors that definitely has multiple
Yeah.
storylines that I want to get to, but I'm always working on other projects, so I'm like, eventually I'll get to you, eventually.
Yeah. And one of the things that I found very, very helpful with writing is like you get in the situation where you start a story and it just doesn't gel, where things don't come together. So what I do is I have a boneyard. So like when I have an unfinished manuscript or something doesn't work, I just save it in a folder in my hard drive, and then I can always go back to get back later and either take pieces from it to use in another book, or I can find or look at it again and realize, okay, these are some things that I can fix to make it work. And Amiga came out from a boneyard. It was a bunch of ideas that I've been struggling with for a long time. And I finally figured out how to put the pieces together to make it work.
That's really neat. And I like that. I like the idea because I do think there are definitely writers out there that get into their head so much that they must have a story and work it and work it and work it until it's ready. And
Mhm.
sometimes maybe wherever you are in your life, not that the story isn't good, but you haven't reached a point in your life to tell it in a way that will do it justice. And so to put it
Yeah,
aside and then allow a different story maybe to develop in the meantime, that's one of the reasons why I started with Asar's Claws and the Incarn Saga is I wanted to figure out the whole writing thing, figure out my author voice, figure out everything. So when I went
yeah,
back and started writing the 12 Tasks and this particular, my young adult Portal Fantasy, that one I've had since I was a little kid, but I knew I wasn't going to be, able to do anything justice when I was a lot
mhm,
younger. So I needed that whole series to kind of write and allow me to figure out the whole writing shtick, if that makes sense.
yeah. And writing is a learn as you go sort of thing. It's as you're writing, you're learning new things, and when you take on new challenges, there are things that you pick up from it. And that's why I think beta readers getting outside input on your book is so important. And it also helps to be a beta reader for other authors. I just beta read a novel from somebody else, and I really learned a lot from the experiences. Much as I gave her advice and suggestions, I saw some things that I could learn and things that she did that were very helpful. So we learn from each other. We really are a writing community.
I love that. I love that. Yes,
Yeah.
definitely learn from each other, and it's one of the reasons why I like to be on different platforms because, especially this one personally, because there are so many authors on here, and they're always very friendly. At least the ones I've talked to have been
Yeah.
very friendly and very open and helpful. And I'm definitely an author that has done everything the wrong way the first way because I didn't know what I didn't know, and I stumbled along. But it's nice to hear so many people just telling their story, telling their processes, because I'll hear one and be like, I never knew that. I didn't know that existed, or I should approach it this way, or maybe I should try what you're suggesting because you kind of don't know what you don't know until
Yeah.
you do.
Yes. And what makes it rewarding is when
Hmm.
you hear somebody who's just starting out and they don't feel confident and they don't know where to start. And then people who've been at this for a while can jump in and they help them and support them.
Mhm.
And that's a really positive thing about this community. I think a lot of you see writing communities that are really closed, and well, if you don't have this much experience, then don't bother, or we know better than you. But we are a very welcoming community, and it's great to see new writers get their start and be inspired to create their own books.
Absolutely. I actually have a couple more questions popping in. One was, okay, one says, I've heard that certain writers actually hate the writing process themselves. Do we actually enjoy physically sitting there and writing the story, or do we like the end result, essentially?
I like the writing. I've been doing it for such a long time that it gets to the point where it's painful when you want to write and you can't write.
Hmm.
And the thing about writing is that, first of all, there is the physical act of sitting down at the keyboard. Although one of the things that I found really helpful is I use Scrivener for my writing, and they have an iOS app. And so if I'm stuck having to do errands for a day, then while I'm waiting, I could do some writing or jot some ideas down.
Hmm.
So it's something that when you get into the mode of it, it becomes, you hate not writing.
That's true. That's true. I mean, I feel like that's the way you want writing to be, and I'm kind of in
Yeah,
agreement with you because I definitely, if I have a long hiatus of not doing new writing, and it's editing's a little different for me, but actually sitting down and writing new material, it is fun. It is a challenge,
yeah,
and but it's a lot of fun to have a whole scene unfold. And again, being fantasy, maybe it's an action scene, or I'm introducing a new villain character that I've been waiting for
yeah.
forever to do, or something. But it's a lot of fun that goes along with it. Um, and have another question pop up along the same idea. How do you discipline yourselves to actually sit there and write consistently?
Well, sometimes it's hard when you have family that and work and other demands that
Hmm.
it when so I think what you have to do, you talked about setting schedules for yourself for writing, and that's what I find that I need to do. And when I've been actively working on a manuscript, I would start in like I would get up a little earlier in the morning, or when I used to work in an office, I would work during my lunch hour or work in the evening when everybody else has gone to bed. What you have to do is carve out time for yourself to write and just make an appointment with yourself that this is your time to write.
Definitely. And because that's the thing is like I'm fortunate at the moment that I am a full-time author and artist. My other half of
Yeah.
my life is a pet hates pets. So, it's
Yeah.
kind of not exactly 100% true either way, but together I cobble it together. But with that said, talking to so many other authors like we're doing right now, most of the writing community has a full-time job. They may have, a full-time job and they're raising a family and all that, and you have to figure out, how motivated you're going to be, where you want to carve out the time and do it. Keep yourself accountable. It could be maybe a short writing sprint of I'm going to do 15 minutes now, 15 minutes 3 hours later or during lunch, whatever. But if you do it consistently, you will eventually write your book. It may not be a quick thing, but you will get there. So you just have to dedicate yourself, I think.
Yeah. And I think that's very important for writers, excuse me, to not pressure themselves to write every day, to write a certain number of words per day, and not to compare themselves with other writers, because you look at people who maybe are able to devote more time for their writing, or maybe they've gotten more successful, or they've gotten on the USA Today or New York Times bestseller list. And you're not in competition with anybody else but yourself. And
Mm-hmm.
so you go at your own pace, you do what you can, and just bit by bit, you'll get there.
Yeah, I think, and I like that. We're not competing with each other. We're helping, you're competing with yourself in a sense.
Right.
And I know for me, once you write a book, I tell people this, what your next goal is to make the next one better. So you're not trying to compete with
Yes.
anybody else, but you're trying to prove yourself each time. And so you want always your next work to be better than the last. And that's really where you need to push yourself and make sure, you want your 10th book to be way, way better than your first because you're
Yeah.
10 books along the way. That's kind of like the
Yes.
whole.
And that's the way I look at it. It's like when I look back at offline, I that was 18 years ago. I mean, I could vote now, but and I look at all the things that I've learned since then, and and certainly even going back to my high school writing, it's cringeworthy now. And if you're not growing, if your next book isn't better than your previous one, then you need to revisit that and see what can I do to grow as a writer.
Mhm. So you were mentioning that you're working on your fifth book, correct? Right
That's
now?
right. Yeah.
So what are you doing to challenge yourself that this next book, whatever the storyline is better than your prior four?
Well, first of all, it is a very difficult book to write because it deals
Mm-hmm.
with some rather difficult subjects. The
Mm-hmm.
core of it was that there was a terrible tragedy that happened in my high school. And I've been trying to write about it for 44 years and have just kept hitting into brick walls. And one of the things that I realized that I needed to do was to fictionalize this core event because, first of all, there are detail. First of all, if I really wanted to write this was something terrible happened to a one of my classmates at our school campus. And if I wanted to write a true crime novel, if I wanted to write it like it actually happened, I would write a true crime book. But true crime isn't in my wheelhouse for
Yeah.
writing. And it sort of doesn't touch on what I really wanted to talk about. And these were all the issues that we ran into in when I was going to high school in the 70s. Things that people don't want to talk about, or that way they say, well, it's the good old days, and they don't want to remember some of the things that weren't so good. So,
Selective memory.
yes. So, just the subject matter alone was challenging, and to deal and
Mm-hmm.
to write about different types of characters. I think it's important as writers to be willing to talk about, to describe characters who are different from us. And so there was a challenge with that as well. So there was a lot of challenging things that went into the story, and it's one of these things that it's a story that makes me a little bit nervous in putting it out in the world. But I think when it gets out there, I think there will be people who will need to hear it and could be benefited from it.
No, absolutely. Like last week actually, pretty sure it was last week, the author I talked to, Christopher, he also was writing about his series of books that he works on all cover really hard topics.
Yeah.
Really hard topics. And yes, there are fictionalized versions of certain things, but they're still covering some real tough stuff. And the point is, there's someone who will be able to relate to that, understand that, and use that as a way to cope and deal if they've had something similar traumatically in their lives. And so those stories do need to be told. They're a little, obviously, they're the uncomfortable side of the reading, and trying to figure out how to market it that might be a little hard,
Yeah.
but they still should be told those stories.
Yes. And I think there may be a tendency with the climate that's going on in the world today in our country that people may want to shy away from difficult subjects. But these are exactly the times when these stories need to be told. And so we have to be willing to be brave and
Yeah.
tell the story as it needs to be told.
And fiction, even though it is what it is, fiction,
Yeah,
is one of the great ways, depending on, how you utilize that as a way to reach some core truths of
yeah.
society, of culture, of, just life that help us reflect and understand, learn, cope, any of the above.
Hmm.
So, and you said this was one that obviously you had in your head for a long, long time, trying to figure out how to approach it. Are you do you know the structure of your story yet, or are you still just trying to plot out how you want to approach your plot line at this moment? Because
Well,
we're
the
all at different
story
stages.
is, I'm sorry, the story is pretty much is very close to being done. And
Hmm.
it was, I'm, God, I've been doing so, I've been having some beta readers doing like a final pass of the book. I've had like about 3 rounds of beta readers.
Hmm.
One of them, well, the first one was somebody I went to school with. We went to the same school. She knew the person who was the subject of the book. So that was, well, the story, the inspiration of that, so, rather. But so that was really helpful to get her feedback. And then I actually paid for a set of beta readers. There was a special deal with this one beta reading service for Black Friday, and got some excellent feedback. And what's interesting about that feedback was that 2 of their beta readers really loved the book and the other one didn't. And what is good about, there's 2 things to remember. Is first of all, when you're writing a book, it doesn't matter how much work you put into it, not everybody's going to love your book.
True. True.
You will get 1-star reviews. And I always say
Yep.
that if you don't have any 1-star reviews, you don't have enough reviews.
That's
So, so, and so it was, so I had to take a look at all of those reviews in aggregate and trying to identify what needs to change and what doesn't. And so I incorporated those changes, but even when I went through the round of drafts, I didn't feel completely comfortable that this book was as strong as it needed to be. So I did send it out to for another set of beta readers. I've gotten one back that was very helpful. This was a person who I rated beta read her book. And by the way, beta reading exchanges are a very good way to get feedback and to help other writers. So I encourage people to do that. And I'm still waiting to hear from the other 2, but I'm hoping to get it submitted by hopefully before the holidays.
Yeah, and I kind of agree with you in the sense beta readers are fantastic. My policy, and I agree, everybody's different. My policy is less is more. I have a small group of people you trust because
Yeah,
everybody's going to have a very strong opinion. If they're there to give you opinions and help critique, they're going to have critiques, and too many might get a little noisy. So, like you did, start with a few, and if you feel like you need more, then add a few more and do another
yeah.
round. But yeah, don't overwhelm yourself with beta readers, but I'm a strong advocate for that as well.
Yeah. And you also have to expect that a certain amount of people will not, you won't hear back from certain people. They
Mm-hmm.
get busy, they have other commitments,
Yep.
and I don't put any pressure on them. I appreciate any any feedback that I get from them, but you also have to be willing to accept that not everybody's going to be able to give you the feedback when you need it. So you're
Mm-hmm.
asking for them to do you a favor, so you got to treat it that way.
That's true, and that's true. But and having done this for a little while, um, for me, it's like yes, there's something about obviously life gets in the way and everything when it comes to beta readers, but I do also note if someone's a little flaky, because if they're going to be regularly flaky, then they're not someone necessarily I
Yeah.
want to stay on my team going forward, because beta readers for you is a way of helping edit and
Hmm.
work your book and make it the way it needs to be, which is different than ARC readers. ARC readers,
Yes.
you can't expect anything out of it. All you can do is like, hey, this is what you're here for.
Yeah.
Read my book. Please let me know what you feedback, but you can't. ask anything beyond that for ARC Reader. But
Right.
betas, I do hold a little more accountable because they're there to help with my editing process. So that's
Yes.
only that's the only difference I have between them.
And remember, don't flip out if a ARC reader gives you a 4-star review instead of a 5. So,
That's true too.
yeah.
That's true. Hey, I had, like going back to the thing is everybody's going to get a bad review at some point, and it may
Yeah.
not necessarily have anything to do with your quality score. They could get your cup of tea. They could have a bad day. One of my one of my ones I joke about all the time. I think it's just hysterical because I got a review that was talking about how much they love the book, love the book, love the book, but had very few stars. Which in the rating
Yeah.
system on Zon, that's what they're looking at, that part of the algorithm.
Mhm.
And the point was, the last line was giving a, whatever star review because it was not a standalone book. But this book literally is labeled book one of a series, so
Yeah.
you can't win them all.
Right.
You can't win them all. That's okay.
Yeah. And I was a few years ago, we were doing a review of, I was in an online book club and we were doing a discussion about the remainders. And this one person thought that, well, at first she had problems with the book. Like, I don't like this one character and you're making this, that, and the other. And then the other person in the group pointed out, oh, what he really meant was this. Then there was a moment of recognition, go, oh, now I get it. So sometimes there's some issues about people might not understand, and even if you have gone through and made things as clear as you possibly can, sometimes people skim or skip over things and they may miss out on something that's important.
Oh, yeah. Very true. Now, I'm an indie author, so all my stuff right now is currently self-published. I'm open to becoming a hybrid down the line and having
Yeah.
certain books, be published in some kind of more along the line of a traditional method. But it sounds like you said that you're kind of hybrid, that you have a couple that you self-published, and then your last two were through a publishing house or something.
That's Black Rose Writing. They're
That's neat. So
a
how's the
small,
process of finding Black Rose writing?
and I think what I'm trying to remember how I found them because I was sort of on the I was sort of indecisive about what I wanted to do with Amiga because I had been submitting it and didn't get any acceptances. And one of the places that I submitted, I thought would be a really good fit. And what happened, and it got rejected. So I was leaning towards, I might as well self-publish it. And then this thing popped up with Black Rose Writing. They were looking for manuscripts, and I said, okay, I'm going to give this a try. And I still remember when we actually were at Disneyland, and I remember when I got the email that said that they accepted the manuscript. We were in
Okay, neat.
California Adventure. I even remember the bench in that I was sitting at when I was reading the email. So that was a really a wonderful moment. And what I like, well, the reason why I decided to go with a publisher in this small press for this particular book is it does offer resources
Mhm,
that you would have to pay out of pocket for if you
mhm.
were to self-publish it, like getting a cover designer, getting an editor, getting they do have marketing and a website and distribution. So a lot of things that you would have to pay for if you were to take the cost, if you were to self-publish. And the other thing that's really good about Black Rose Writing is they have a really great community of writers. We have a Facebook group, and we're always supporting each other, and we're sharing ideas, and we give each other encouragement. You may have heard Sean Warner, the author whose book went. There was a TikTok video where he was trying to promote his book at a supermarket and then read this person came up and bought his book and encouraged everybody else to and the book
Oh,
to buy and he is a Black Rose writing author.
oh, that's
So we've
neat.
all been really excited for him, and he's been on on all the news stations. I think his book did hit the USA Today top 25. So it's been a serotonin boost for all of us.
I love that. I love that. And
Yeah.
again, it goes back to finding a writing community that's supportive and helps you along, and that's fantastic. But
Yes.
yeah, when it comes to small press, everybody do your research because everybody, each one of them may offer certain things. Some may not even offer anything outside of literally just publishing a book. So do your research and
Right.
make sure whoever you use is valid and gives you what you're expecting to get out of it. And no, again, small print is small print for a reason. Middle level is middle level. The full big five, they offer different things. And again, indie, you have the most control, but it is expensive.
Yes, it is. And I think the thing to remember is regardless of what level you're
Yeah.
at in terms of you're going to have to take a lot of the responsibility for marketing. Even if you get picked up as by a big five, you're still going to have to put
That's
yourself
true.
out there. You're still going to have to build a platform, build a social media presence, build a newsletter, whatever you need to do to promote yourself. They're not going to, even the big folks aren't going to do it for you. You've got to plug yourself.
Yeah, and it's every year, every day, the publishing industry is changing. So, what people were offered back a few years ago is not necessarily what they're offered now. A lot of people, like you were saying, um, have to still market their books, even if you are in the big five. I see a lot
Yeah.
of authors that I follow, who are big five authors, and they're on the social media as well, pushing their books too, because it's part of the gig now.
Yes,
Welcome
it
to the
is.
modern world. But
That's right.
have a couple more questions that popped up. Do either of us use any writing assistant programs like Dramatica? It basically expands your plot, characters, etc. by asking questions. So, do you use any kind of writing programs of any kind of sort?
I looked at Dramatica many years ago excuse me, when I was into script writing, because that's how I heard about Dramatica. And I think that tools like that could be really helpful when you're starting out, but I've gotten myself into such a flow with and have gained enough experience that I don't wouldn't need a program like that. But if you find those tools are helpful, there's lots of different ones, and there's I think was it Campfire Blaze or some that are really specific for fantasy and because there's those stories and developing maps and lore and history and character relationships is even more important for so there are lots of different tools out there and a lot of different that's been some of them specialize in different types of storytelling. Now,
Yeah, no,
one
that.
program, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Oh, I was gonna say I actually had not heard of Dramatica, but I'm also I joke that I'm old school. I literally am a person that uses Word.
Yes.
Nothing fancy. I use Word. That's what I do. But I also, if anybody ever saw my desk in my office, it kind of looks like one of those murder mystery scenes because
Yeah.
I use the whole wall in front of me with colored sticky notes and with all information, and that's kind of how I keep organized, which is not necessarily recommendable. I know some of these programs are probably more efficient than the way I approach it, but that's the way I've approached it.
Yeah. The program that I use for my writing is Scrivener. And what I like about it is two main things. First of all, it's very easy to break your story down into scenes and chapters, and that makes it easier to move things around if you need to. You can have a really good overview of the structure of the story, and you're not in a situation, and it makes it easy to find portions of your book if you're looking for things. The other good thing about Scrivener is you can output your Scrivener manuscripts in a variety of formats. Like I can generate a Word file that I can use for submission, but for self-publish, you could also generate PDFs, and they do a good job of generating various ebook formats. So I find it very helpful for that. So,
And I hear a lot of people when they do utilize different kind of assistant tech for writing. Scrivener is one of the ones that a number of people use. And the question popped up towards you outside of Dramatica Pro. What was the other one you had mentioned just a little bit ago?
well, the one I was going to mention was Scrivener, but there was also a thing called Campfire Blaze. There's I've heard a little bit about it. There's let's see, I'm trying to think if there were some other ones, but mostly to take a look around and do some research and try out. Like, for example, I know that if you follow some of the authors on this platform or on the other major video platform, that like Jenna Morassi and Bad Writing Advice or Terrible Writing Advice, which both of my favorite both of my favorite channels for writing tips, and they are usually sponsored by these tools, and so it's a good way of learning about writing from these different, very experienced, very funny people, and also to get some ideas about different tools you can use.
Yeah. I see have someone popped up saying they're using Google Docs because you can write it from anywhere. I will admit, based on the whole new AI and a lot of these companies signing off rights where AI can analyze stuff, including Google Docs, it makes me a little uncomfortable. But then again, I can't claim Word's better because their contract's a little iffy. Though an
Yeah,
interesting person on here who's deep diving into contracts of all sorts in the hopes that authors have the best resources available to them and know what they're signing on and what they're signing away when they're doing any kind of tech from Google Docs to Word to any of these other platforms is Rebecca Thorne on here. And she's doing a
yeah,
lot of that for people. And I think she's, if you're interested in that kind of stuff, she has so much content about that and really breaks it down of, the author side of things. Because unfortunately, those are questions we need to start asking ourselves
yeah,
because I kind of want to keep my stories my stories.
yeah. No,
Just
I
saying.
agree that, yeah, these days we really have to be careful before
Yeah.
we I know that people, when you see the terms and agreements for whatever piece of software, we just click agree, but now I think we need to read those
Yeah.
very carefully.
That is true, and it's like one of those unfortunate things that that is going to eat a bunch of our time, but it is
Yeah,
one of those things we should all get in the habit too. And I know again what the term legalese, and it's going to make your eyes cross half the time, but
yeah,
you as the user needs to know what what you are agreeing to in many ways.
yes.
But I do want to make sure I ask you. So where can people find your books um, at the moment, and what platforms are you on? I always like making sure I ask this from all my co-hosts.
Well, if you go to the link tree in my bio, it has all of the various links to where you can find my books. Of course, they're available on the major online bookstore platform. I don't know if we can mention names here, but the links in my link tree will take you there. And my website is matthewarnoldstern.com. That's MatthewArnoldStern.com.
Easy
And that
enough.
has links to all my books and everything else and my other social media.
I love it. Yeah, no, I always like because there are definitely some people, not everybody, some people who do like to follow authors on different platforms because format has its own vibe,
Yeah.
essentially. And I have a bad habit, or maybe it's a good habit, that I repurpose a lot of my videos from this platform onto my other one, so you get a lot of that. I
Yes.
understand, but each platform does have its own vibe, and maybe someone likes the idea of hanging out with you on multiple ones. So that's why I always like to ask that. And also, because I will be repurposing this on my YouTube channel in a few weeks, I'll make sure I put all your links below
Okay.
so people can quickly just easily link on and find you and learn more about all your books that are out now and coming out, because that is exciting. Your fifth book is in the beta, at the ends of the beta stage. So,
Right. And if you visit my website, what I normally do is I post a lot of articles about not only my books, but different things that I see that are going on and various areas of interest. So, there's a lot of things. And there's also where you can learn more about the books and my other writing.
I love that. I love that. But one other thing I always want to make sure I ask, and since while I'm thinking about it, um, since we do have a few more minutes in our hour, is there any particular topic that you want to cover right now, or any questions that you have that you want to pose while we have some time to go through them?
Well, I do want to touch on a question that somebody else asked. This mug, of course, everything's reversed on TikTok. I don't know why, but this was a gift from my daughter. This was a birthday present, so I get to show that off. It's
I love
the
it.
mug that I think every writer probably has in their collection, which is "Be careful, or you'll end up in my novel."
I actually don't have that one in my bookish collection, and I do collect odd bookish things like T-shirts and mugs. Now
Yeah,
I'm running out of shelf for mugs, but I
yeah,
don't have that one. I like that. That is good.
yes.
Definitely brilliant. Well, I want to know, because you're going through beta stage. We talked about betas. Do you utilize, traditional editors? And if so, is that through your publishing house, or is that someone that you go out specifically and hire before your books goes to your publishing house?
You know, I use the publisher through, or I use the editor through the publisher. I know that I know that one of the problems that a lot of writers have are having the budget for editors because editors are expensive.
Mm-hmm.
And so, and there are tools out there, like I use Pro Writing Aid, which is a very helpful tool. And I know that they've made a lot of enhancements to it in terms of
Mm-hmm.
rephrasing, and it's also very good for catching typos or things that I do, like listening to. You can do a read aloud function in,
Oh yes.
like Word has that, so it helps to read a book, have that book read back to you because you notice things that you wouldn't notice if you've been reading the same page for thousands of times. But
That's
no, I would say that, you know, if I had the budget for editing, I would definitely use that. But I do think that if you're going to self-publish a book, then you need to invest in
mm-hmm.
having a professional editor because if you're getting your book published, then your publisher has an editor, but you don't have that. That's something you have, that's a service you have to get if you self-publish. The mistake that a lot of writers, self-published authors make, it was a mistake that I made in some of my first books was not to get a publisher an editor for it.
Yeah, I'm a big advocate for getting an editor or multiple. Again, each editor has
Yeah.
maybe their own specialty and a different type of editors for people who don't know. So you have to figure out what you need and obviously do what you need and get so that your book is, when it releases, it's the best it can be, and that's what you really want.
Yes.
You want to give it the best chance. It's your book baby, it's your child.
Yeah.
You spend a little time with it. You want to make sure, when it goes out to the world, it does the best thing. But yeah, I'm glad you mentioned the fact that things like Word have the capability of reading the book to you, because I know
Mhm.
one of my beta readers, who also sometimes, depending on my book, will be an editor as well. One of my editors, because I have a couple of them. But one of the functions always advocated by him was let it read to you aloud, because you know your story, and just hearing something read it, you might catch something that you're like, wait, that's not right. I know
Yeah,
for me, I actually do read aloud the book at a certain stage of the editing process, which is where my voice starts getting scratchy, because I'm like, if I'm at that stage, it's because I spent hours a day reading
yeah,
aloud. But it does help you really focus in on your words and your grammar, and you catch things that if you were just skimming, your eyes just start going through it because you know the material, you've looked at it 1,002 times, and you start missing things,
yeah,
or not catching everything.
yeah.
But yeah, that's very
It,
good.
and I think one thing you should do, one thing you have to recognize is that it doesn't matter how many times you've edited your book. It doesn't matter how many professional editors you've hired or how many times the professional editor publisher has looked at it. There will be typos that slip through. It's
That's true.
impossible in a 70, 80, 100,000 word book to not have typos. And you can definitely name so many examples of books that came out of big five publishers that have typos and mistakes and stuff in it. So we want to make our books as good as we possibly can, but understand that they will never be perfect. You just have to write the best book you can and get it out there for people to read.
And again, as an indie author, I'm a little spoiled in the sense that if there is, not if, when that grammatical
Yeah.
error, or when the typo, or when whatever pops up and someone points it out, it's easy for an indie author to go back and adjust the document, re-upload it, and correct it as you go. It's a little harder when you go through a professional publishing route, because
Yes.
you're not the one in control of the editing of the book at the end stage. So there is that. But again, like you were talking about, you get perks on your side of things too, and everybody has to decide what they want out of whichever method they choose publishing wise, if that makes
Right.
sense. Okay, we have one more question that popped up, and it might be one of our last ones of the night. Once once you have a general idea of the story, I'm assuming this is general question of what's our writing process, in the sense, do you outline? Are you a planner, pantser? All these fun terms that people now
Yeah.
slap on. There you go. Yes. Okay. Yes, that's what
Yes.
I wondered.
Well, I am more of well, the process depends on the book itself because sometimes the story is one where you really need to plan it out before you can start writing. You have to make sense of what you're doing. So those things start off with outlines. But I've started out with an outline, and once I start writing, all bets are off because once I get into the story, then I immediately see things that need to change, and I'll start moving things around. There are some stories where I can just jump in and start writing, but after a while, you've got to have some more. You got to put some organization into it. You've got to move things around and put some structure in it. So it's a combination of planner and pantser, and what starts first depends on what the story is. And what it's meant to be.
Yeah, and every author is different. There are some that I've talked to who are hardcore. They have planned it out. They're pretty much,
Yeah,
their draft is going to be like their storyline is going to be their first draft because they planned it out to the T. Other people
yeah,
just sit down and plug it away, and that's how they write. They don't even know what the ending's going to be until they're like, oh, the end.
yeah,
I like you am a little bit in between. When I come up, or so far, when I've come up with a concept, I'm a series writer, so I come up with a series before I even start writing. I already know more or less how many books are going to be in the series, the main character, the main plots, the main issues, and a few of the subplots. And I kind of sit down and start going through it. But along the way, even though I start planning out, okay, I'm definitely hitting this point and this point and this point, I'm not so strict that a character doesn't write himself into being, which has happened multiple
Yeah.
times. A subplot or backstory reveals itself, and I think that's fun. Is where some of the organic development occurs as you're going along. But I do, whenever I come up with an idea that I want to incorporate later, I just have a weird structure. Again, don't recommend it necessarily, but I have what I call rolling pages. So wherever I am in my book or series, if I'm trying to have like idea of like a scene or a conversation that should happen maybe later on in the book or maybe in a couple books later, I'll take a little pause, plug, write that little thing, write those memos, kind of put it in what I think is going to be a chronological order, and then go back to where I'm writing. And so,
Yeah.
depending on how long the series is, I may have like 25 pages of all these notes that I then, when I get to that point, I just plug it back in. I'm like, there you go, the scene's already done.
Yeah.
Move on.
I do that a lot too. And that's one of the nice things about Scrivener is just really easy to go to that particular section or to add a sticky note to that particular passage, or I'll just type in brackets and say, something is supposed to happen here with these characters. And then you can always go back to it.
Yep, I've not used that, but again, I hear it's highly recommended, Scrivener. So if you're trying to get into writing, Scrivener may be something you want to look into
Yeah.
because my organization works for me, but it's probably a little too weird for most people.
Yeah.
So maybe Scrivener that has a little more of a structure and ease of being able to jump around might be better.
Yeah. So the upshot is that always pick every writer has their own process and their own tools
hmm
that work best for them. So pick what works best for you. Don't think that just because these writers use this tool is that it's something you have to use. Figure out what works best for you.
And that is 100%. 100%
Yeah.
true. I advocate that. And that's why it's sometimes hard to answer some of these more general questions because again, what works for me may not work for
Mhm.
someone else just because we're wired differently. And or we write very different genres. So something that may work a little bit better for someone who's writing a biography may not necessarily be the same way someone wants to approach writing an epic fantasy.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, it looks like we're rounding the end of the hour, and I just want to make sure I say thank you for coming out and hanging out and talking about your books and meeting you. And again, if there's anything else you want to talk about before we end our hour, and anybody who's listening has any other questions, please let us know. But I'm just so glad we got to do this tonight.
Yeah, I'm glad we got to do this too. It's a lot of fun, and what I love about TikTok is it's such a relaxed and casual environment that so this was a lot of fun, and I enjoyed meeting you and enjoying it meeting everybody here who joined today.
Ooh, and I will say one thing. One of my other author friends who pops in just mentioned that had a cover reveal. So
Yes,
congratulations!
congratulations! I saw
We
that pop
love
up
hearing.
too. So
I love it. I love it. I'm very bad about cover reveals. For whatever reason, I'm like, oh yeah, that's the cover.
yeah. I had a lot of fun with the cover reveal for the remainders because I did a temporary cover as I was doing various drafts. So I showed that, and then bit by bit, I showed the temporary cover being erased and then
Yeah,
the final cover. So that could be a lot of fun. It's a great way of building interest in your books.
I know. I need to
So
be better about that.
congratulations to Dee Carlson on your cover reveal today.
Yeah. Okay, that gives me my last question of the night because now it popped in my head. So as an author, we all have our strengths and we all have our weaknesses. So you think is one of your strengths as a writer, and what's maybe something you feel like you could improve upon? Maybe we won't call it weakness. Something you need to improve upon.
Right. Well, one of the things that I'm strong in is getting into the heads of my characters. I've been using first person for a few years and have done it with the two novels, Amiga and the Remainders, and then the one that I'm working on, and it's a lot of fun to occupy another person's mind and what it's like to be in that person's, live that person's life. The other area, the area of improvement is I'm still learning the craft of writing. It is a lifelong
Hmm.
effort, and we always learn new things and we learn things from each other. So I always go in with an attitude of I want to learn more. And it's that's one of the things that makes this profession fun.
That is, yes, that's true. And as I mentioned a little earlier, this is a field where every day you blink and there's some new tech, there's something new in the
Yeah,
publishing industry, a new platform developing to aid in. We need to challenge ourselves to constantly learn. We should never get to the point where we feel we know everything. Don't
yeah,
get
no, we
overconfident
don't.
with that. Always challenge yourself to improve, and that I think would help tremendously, down the line for everybody.
Absolutely. I do feel that the more experience I get, the more I know need to learn. So it's we should always be open to new ideas and be open to challenging ourselves.
That is, yeah, that is very true. And don't be afraid to try something new. That's
Right.
another
And
one.
don't be
I like,
afraid
I
to
like.
and don't be afraid to make mistakes.
That's
That's
true too.
yeah.
Because guess what? We're gonna make them anyways. But so put the
That's
fear
right.
aside and just know again it's part of that learning curve. And that's unfortunate sometimes because some of the mistakes may be bigger than others, but it is part of the learning curve. And you live and you learn, and hopefully you don't make them again.
That's right.
Well, thank you so much, and I hope we keep in touch. And I will definitely be letting you know when I repurpose this. I'm
Yeah.
already getting myself tongue tied. Put this up on my YouTube channel, and for everybody who's been chiming in, thank you for hanging out with us tonight.
Yeah. Thank you very much, and thank you for inviting me today.
Of course, and we will definitely be talking soon.
Okay,
Bye,
great.
everyone.
Okay, bye bye.